Hello guys, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Anko cheats on Naruto? If you enjoy this video then please like, share and do comment. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. So let us start the story.
The night was filled with the full moon's light, giving forth shadows indiscriminate from that of a tree's or a person's, making it a perfect dusk hour for those known as shinobi, those green flak-jacketed warriors of stealth and warp perfectly hidden beneath the folds of darkness. But this night was not a night for just stealth or war. This night was filled with a large amount of very irate shinobi as they sped about in the trees, jumping and leaping, looking for a single individual. This boy, sun-kissed hair, sapphire eyes, and whiskered visage wearing an orange jumpsuit, had stolen something in his village hidden amongst the leaves. The scroll of sealing, it was called, and the boy, a mere youth, had up and stolen it, spiriting it away to a shed in these darkened woods. Far away from his village and far be it enough that he ran that he could study its ancient writings. He opened the scroll and began reading, and the first thing he read was supposedly one of the worst things he could do. But he was a stubborn lad and a persevering one at that. So, besides a grumble at first, he went on with it, taking well long enough that, once he had about mastered it, he was found. But the thing was, it was not his senseis, Iruka and Mizuki. Nor was it the old man Saratobi, or any other shinobi, for this being was something else entirely. Hey Iruka, ya caught me, Naruto Uzumaki had nearly choked on his tongue when this person showed up, out of nowhere, sneaking here before him just as he finished learning the Kage Bushin. She hell no was there a doubt against that, had a black kimono on, a robe-like attire, a pink scarf, a sash of white wrapped around her slim waist, and brown grass-woven sandals. At her hip was a simple katana, sheathed there with a cat's visage for the crossguard. But all of this paled in comparison when he looked at her as a whole, with her orange hair cascading down in swirls, framing her heart-sharpened face and large sparkling oceanic blue eyes. Her full lips parted to speak, with a hand on her hip, and said something that made Naruto's heart skip a beat. Huh? Well, it wasn't the elegance of the words but more so the voice as they say. Who's that? Ah, never mind. But, what are you doing here? She asked, wondering why a human was out in the middle of the woods. Naruto was still enchanted by her and could only mutter nonsensible words in response. With this, the woman stepped towards him, striding over the ground with elegance unlike any other. Then she squatted down in front of him, and only then did he jump back in surprise, scroll of sealing tumbling with him. Who da what? The woman cocked her head to the side, slight confusion crossing her face with a quirked brow. My name's Rangaku Matsumoto. Her voice was courteous. Her hand extended towards him, and he receded further, unsure of the strange-ish woman. She saw this and sighed, stood, and shook her head. Ya know it's dangerous for a human child to be in these woods, a hallow is around. She told, placing her other hand on her hip, leaning that way. Naruto did not budge, but his hands came together, two fingers pointed and placed into a cross. Hey lady, I'm a ninja, and no hallow whatever that is gonna scare me away. His angry bellow was met with more confusion. For what reason did he cross himself, and how was this child a shinobi? But before she could say anything, a glass-shattering roar filled the air, shrill and reverberating in its tone and menacing tune. That's a hallow, Rangaku shouted, unsheathing her sword and holding it aloft with both hands. Get behind me, she shouted again, feeling the unnatural spiritual pressure increase as the hallow came closer. But Naruto didn't listen to her. Naruto was thick-headed. Naruto was not gonna listen to a woman no matter how pretty she looked that he just met. And so he whirled about, scroll of sealing slung over his back, as he put his hands together and performed the jutsu, giving out a war cry of Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Plumes of smoke appeared at his sides and behind him, a literal army of orange-clad Narutos, all ready and rearing to go. Each of them pulled out a kunai just as a xenomorphic monster with a white mask like a fish and a lanky body of gray muscle crashed through the shed. Wood and tin exploded out as it thrashed, on a rampage it seemed. Naruto's clones leapt high into the night's folds, coming down on the creature without haste, ready to slash this insane creature up or beat it down, whichever ceased this creature's insanity. But the first line were poofed, just as the creature lifted a large hand and swiped it across the starry night. The original looked on, having landed besides the Rangaku woman, unafraid as he put the seal down with a gentle hand, watching the creature with careful examination as it poofed the army of clones. Out of the blue, he said, "By the way, the name's Naruto Uzumaki, and I ain't some kid." And he too leapt forward, into the fray, leaving the Soul Reaper lieutenant, intrigued. How could this human make copies of himself? Was it that chakra stuff the other Soul Reapers spoke about when referring to this world of the living? Maybe, and if so, it was exciting. Perhaps, she would visit this world more often, use her vacation days and such. She shook herself of her ponderings and brought her Zanpakuto to her side, then dashed into the fight, just as the Naruto kid had. Naruto strafed to the side, avoiding the tall creature's swinging arms, and dashed forward, taking advantage of the opening. His fist clenched tight and cocked back, he snapped his arm forward, slamming his fist against the creature's ribs. The smacking sound echoed across the forest, followed by a gnashing slice as cold steel blade penetrated unprotected flesh. Naruto looked to the side, seeing that the Rangaku lady had sliced the hallow down the side of the white mask. The hallow screeched and retracted in pain, falling back in misted and warped shadow that shimmered for a moment, then faded like vapor. Rangaku looked to Naruto and smiled. "It'll be back, Naruto tilde." He was taken aback by that. Was he just flirted with? Was that flirting? Did she just wink at him? She did wink. She did flirt with him. Why? Wah. But before he could spaz out, it did return, just behind them, scooping up Naruto with one of its large hands, covering him completely, clenching its fist in an attempt to crush him into Victus goop. But it failed as an explosion of orange forced its hand open, and Naruto's clones leapt at it, tackling it to the ground. "Kill it," they shouted. The original nodded and leapt up over the beast's thrashing form, descending down with a kunai. The rushing air passed through his form, whistling through his hair, and the double-sided dagger was poised and ready with clenched fingers wrapped tightly around it. Then, he plunged the blade through its skull. The hallow thrashed about in reckless abandon, poofing the clones with its long arms when it swung and smacking the original into the black woods. Rawww. Rangaku's eyes widened, then narrowed unto the raging beast, anger beginning to shine through her usually bubbly self. She placed her hand near the hilt of her blade and swiped it down the spine, shouting out, "Hineka." All but the guard and handle seemed to disintegrate into ash, ash that flew out at the hallow, ash that began cutting through the hallow's hide like wet tissue. It raged against the pain though, thrashing more and more, throwing the ash to the side futilely as it came back to slice it more. It tried to keep standing, but the cuts became gashes of blood, and soon, it found itself taking a knee. But before it could fully succumb, its hand flashed out like lightning, grabbing the Soul Reaper and holding tight, squeezing her and threatening to break her with its mighty grip. The ashes stopped, as she feared she would cut herself, and the wounds on its body slowly began to close. "No you don't." A rough voice broke between the night, gruff and determined it was. Rangaku twisted around as best she could, grunting through the pain, and saw Naruto, his orange jumpsuit torn and in tatters, threadbare and red with his own blood. But he stood amongst the pain, arms lax at his sides, a fire of determination blaring in those sapphire orbs. His arms raised, forming the cross-hand sign, allowing the chakra to mold through him, the burning energy forming several hundred clones out of thin air. A clone stood next to him, transforming into a large shuriken, which he caught. "I don't know who you are, or what you want, lady." Half of the clones above him turned into the same-sized shurikens. "But I will not stand for reckless killing." The other half grabbed the transformed clones. "I won't allow any innocent to die." They pulled back the giant throwing stars. "I am Naruto Uzumaki, and one day I will become the Hokage. Believe it." And they let bare the hail of shurikens, the black mass eclipsing the moon itself in their own magnitude, bathing both the creature and the Soul Reaper it held in a sharp looming abyss. They came down, and Rangaku thought she was a goner. She thought she was going to be ripped asunder by hundreds of those deadly things. She thought that Naruto was going to hit her along with the hallow, and she closed her eyes, believing that, as they were but a second away from her. Rawwww. The hallow screeched its final breath as the giant shurikens pierced it, one by one, sinking into it with ease, spraying blood across the now crimson grass, leaving its final breath to shudder out in painful desaris before dissipating into a burst of black ash, the disintegrating body flowing through the crevices of dimensional space and time, while its conciseness plummeted into oblivion, to know no more. Poetic stuff, but that didn't matter to Rangaku, as she fell from its dispersing grip, falling to the ground on her hands and knees, gasping in short breaths, taking in as much as she could. When she looked up, she saw Naruto, standing there, hands still extended in the fashion he had let go of the shuriken clone. His breath was ragged, his body shaking, exhaustion taking its vicious hold onto him too. His eyes went half-lidded, then, he swayed on wooden legs. Back, forth, left, right, his eyes shut fully, and, thump, and he was knocked out cold, falling face first on the ground. His groan reached the orange-haired woman's ears, and she smiled, giggled, then chuckled, then laughed hysterically. She was a bit tired too, and her jovial laughter was groggy and, if the boy was awake, cute. But he wasn't, he was out cold, and she couldn't leave him. Especially not with the sign of just a halo around. There always could be more, and she had a feeling she and this Naruto would see more of each other. Who knew, maybe she'd train him. He may not be a Shinigami, or have a Zanpakuto yet, but it was worth the try. Especially after the fact that he killed a halo. Very few humans could do that, even a shinobi. She stood woodenly, swaying as when she drank too much sake, and came towards him, picking him up with ease as her strength returned. She shouldered him and allowed her Zanpakuto to reform back from its shikai to its normal state of being a katana. She may not have bankai, but that didn't matter to her. She was a lieutenant, and could compare to a captain level. Oh? She stopped, sheathing her sword, and looked down at the scroll the boy had not but a few minutes before had. A large scroll it was, holding secrets shinobi and civilian alike, and a certain head of research and development captain would love to look over would kill for. But she had no desire for such a thing, no will or reason to pick it up and learn from it. She grabbed it anyway, deducing that maybe the leader of this place would desire to have it back. With that in hand, and Naruto in the other, she flash-stepped away, spiriting him towards somewhere. She would return to Soul Society in a few hours, the morning light coming, so she'd just have to tell her Captain Lie that the halo was difficult, take a vacation day, and come to the world of the living, not the one she would usually visit, but this one. She dropped off the scroll in the Hokage's office, or what she could tell by the sign, up in the tan and red round building, and finally left Naruto off atop what looked like apartment complexes. Rangaku was about to leave this world when she stopped herself, reaching into the top part of her kimono attire, and pulled out a piece of paper and pencil, wrote down something for him in the morning, and leaned down to put it in his pocket, and stopped after. While leaning there, and the note in his pocket, she leaned further, inches from his face, noticing he was a cute little fella. She kissed him briefly, then stood, hand on her hip, a playful smirk on her lips as she opened the sliding gates to Soul Society. "I'll be back, Naruto-kun." Iruka found himself in a tight situation. Right now, in front of him, lay a bloodied, but breathing, Naruto. He checked the boy and saw that his injuries were not but nicks by now, and it seemed that he was only suffering from chakra exhaustion, as if he had used much of it up in but a short time. He'd wake up soon, but Iruka made no move to tie him. How could he? Naruto grew up in the same fashion he had, alone and scared, unwanted and shunned. No one wanted them, they gave them nothing, only whispers and glares. For that reason, they both became something like a clown, doing things that at the very least got people to look at them and talk to them. Granted, they shouted at them for being idiots, but neither had cared, for recognition was all they wanted. That was the reason he could do nothing, couldn't bring himself to turn Naruto in, for they were the same, in a sense. Ow! A groan of annoyance came from the boy as waking life slowly took hold. Iruka looked on as he turned about, as if he didn't wish to open his eyes, wishing only to remain asleep. But, eventually, he opened his blue orbs. Groggy, he was at first, and so Naruto could only sit up, could only blink away the clouds of sleep from his oceanic eyes. Then, he noticed Iruka, standing there, his own eyes regarding Naruto with scrutiny, as if unsure of something. "Ah, hey Iruka." The man said nothing, only staring on, thinking. Hello, Iruka, can you hear me?" The boy asked again, trying to gain the man's absent attention. Still more silence. "Are you ignoring me?" Naruto was a bit mad now. "Nothing, Iruka," he shouted. The boy shot up, slightly irate, causing the man to shake his head. Naruto, I don't know why you did it. Anger slipped away and was filled by confusion. Then the whiskered boy asked. Wha? Iruka dipped his head, brows furrowed. Why did you steal the scroll, Naruto? The boy looked at Iruka for a moment, then looked around, then back to Iruka. It was then, at that moment, that Naruto realized he screwed up. Bah, where is it? If I don't get it to Mizuki, I'll fail the test. No, 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 no. The boy screamed, looking about, running back and forth, worry present on his face. Iruka on the other hand was taken aback by what the boy said. Mizuki put him up to it. And he knew Naruto wasn't lying either. He knew the boy well enough to see how terrible at it he was. Plain and simple, he could not lie, even if he tried. But that didn't shock him. No, it was who put him up to it that surprised Iruka. His friend, fellow teacher, fellow shinobi, had betrayed the leaf. But why? Why would he do that? He realized that Naruto was still yelling and grabbed the boy's shoulder, stopping him. Naruto, Mizuki told you to do this, right? A nod. Naruto, that wasn't a test, Yeah, it was, so I could get my headband, he told me so. The boy was defiant. He lied to you, Naruto. He wanted you to steal it for whatever reason. He honestly didn't know. Silence hung there for a moment, until Naruto brushed the man's hand aside. I don't believe you. His voice was low. Naruto, you've been so hard on me, and no matter how hard I try, you just keep failing me. So why should I trust you? Mizuki was kind to me. He was giving me another chance. A chance you didn't give. He was gonna let me pass. But you keep pushing me around. It was an angry tone, turning furious. His voice lowered further. I hate you. Iruka bristled at this, his own anger beginning to broil and writhe within him as Naruto talked about how he was unfair to him. But those last words, toppled with the last night events, and the betrayal of his friend, pushed Iruka over the edge. You know nothing. And Iruka slugged Naruto across the face, making stars explode before the boy's vision, dotting his eyes with pinpricks of white, for a moment, as he tumbled back on the rooftops in a tangled mess of limbs. Naruto sprung up a moment later, shocked for a moment, then furious the next. I've been helping you. Iruka bellowed, rushing towards Naruto, fists raised. Liar. And Naruto met his sensei in the middle, both in a fit of worked-up rage. Naruto caught the first fist but was blindsided by an elbow to the cheek as Iruka followed through with his momentum. Recovering, Naruto swung his leg around, side-kicking the man in the gut, driving him back a few steps. The whiskered blonde leapt up and came down, foot extended. Iruka raised his arms in time, blocking the axe kick, then grabbed Naruto by the ankle, swinging his entire body back, bringing Naruto back with him, slamming the blonde into the apartment roof with a loud thud, and was about to get up, when Iruka got on top of him, pinning him down, one hand clasped around his neck. Listen, you little brat, Iruka yelled, his voice filled with rage as Naruto clawed at his wrist, trying to free himself. You and I are just the same. When I lost my parents to the demon fox, I was left with no one. Everyone glared at me, ignored me. When I was in the academy, I had to act stupid just so I could get some kind of recognition. Wham! Naruto's face contorted into a painful grimace as his head whip lashed from the blow. I know why they hate you too. Why I hated you until I saw who you really are. This one was straight on, his punch nearly breaking the boy's nose. Because you are the Jinchuriku of the Nine Tails. Naruto's eyes snapped open, his blue orbs snapping crimson for a moment as he punched Iruka, hard, sending him flying back. You bastard! Naruto bellowed with fury, already standing with knuckle-white fists. He rushed forward, ready to continue the fight, ready to beat Iruka into the roof and down into the ground, when a flash of white robes filled his vision. Naruto skidded to a stop, nearly bowling into the very man who he saw as a grandpa. Gigi. Yes, the current Hokage of Konohagakure, in all of his glory, stood before Naruto. His white hat with red triangled top peered over the man's wrinkled visage, and his white robe danced in the slight breeze, making the scarlet flames emboldened at the bottom look as though they truly were aflame. Naruto, his voice was calm, holding a slight edge near the end, you can stop this fight now. It was a warning for him not to continue the fight, lest he enrage the man and dwindle his patience. Naruto did, at the very least, out of respect, knowing the man wouldn't really hurt him. Mizuki has been apprehended, and has told us that he was planning to frame you after you stole the scroll for him. He told us everything, he told, quietly adding, Anko Mitarashi made sure of that. Naruto took a step back, realizing that Iruka was telling the truth about Mizuki, and if that was true, then so too. Naruto, are you okay? You look sick to the stomach? Sarutobi asked, concern replacing his once stoic face. The blonde could only nod, shaken by the revelation. He was about to ask if he could just go home when Iruka stood, walked and half stumbled over to Naruto. Then, with his eyes gleaming with a calmness and his voice soft, he said, I think you deserve this, Naruto. I'm sorry for everything. He hesitated on his words whether he was apologizing for his curse or the fight, he knew not. But he did not hesitate in his actions. Rough fingers raised to the back of his head, untying the cloth of his headband, holding it out to the boy. Naruto looked at it, then to Iruka. Iruka, are you sure of this? When he passes, we can no longer protect him when he goes on a mission. Sarutobi told, but soon saw the look the younger man had in his eyes. The same determination Naruto possessed, the hurt both of them shared. Alright, the Hokage receded, just make sure he gets his team assignment tomorrow. With that, Sarutobi shunshined away. Iruka handed Naruto his headband, taking a step back. Naruto looked at the leaf symbol etched into the metal, the symbol for shinobi here. He was a shinobi here. He had the chance to become the Hokage here, all because of Iruka, because the man believed in him. He said it all the time, and finally, it paid off, dat bayo. Naruto wrapped the headband around his temple, tied it off, and grinned, but before he could give a whoop of triumph, Iruka asked him a question. Ramen? Ramen? Naruto repeated. Ramen. Iruka affirmed. Ramen. Naruto shouted, smiling like a Cheshire cat. And soon they find themselves sitting in Ichiraku's, downing ramen like it was choice steak, garbling down noodles and broth as if it the elixir of life. Which to Naruto, it kinda was. While Iruka loved ramen, there was no way he could keep up with the boy who was a few bowls ahead of him. The only ones that could possibly beat him in eating ramen was an Akamichi, and even then, he wasn't sure. The boy's love for ramen was unnatural. But Iruka didn't dwell on how Naruto was able to eat literal pounds of noodles and beef and not burst like a balloon. That kind of scientific thinking was beyond him. Ayame came near the counter, setting 2 more bowls down for them. She was about to go back in when a gleam of silver caught her brown orbs. She had to rub her eyes and pinch her arm when she saw it, the headband, the leaf symbol etched prominently on the boy's head. Ayame leaned over the counter and poked it, as if testing if it were there. You got your headband, she exclaimed, half in disbelief, the other half in joy, clasping her hands together with big, ol' smile up one side of her face. Heh, yeah, Iruka gave me his, and now I can go on missions. Naruto told, grinning with pride. Ayame frowned suddenly, saying, that's not good. What? Why's that? His grin faltered. Well, because you eat so much ramen here. What about it? He leaned over the table concerned. She smiled. You pay for most of our stuff. And the boy fell out of his seat, body careening back in his chair, head striking against the hard ground with a sharp thud. He clutched the back of his skull in slight pain, a welt forming there. Iruka and Ayame laughed at him, jovial and filled with jest, but Naruto grumbled, stood, and glared. But then, he brushed himself off, frown disappearing, being replaced by a cheeky grin that could have put the devil to shame. Oh, you wound me so, I guess I'll just go home. What friends are you to laugh at a downed man? He spoke as if he were in Shakespeare, even going as far as placing one hand over his heart, the other extended out in play form, whilst a fake look of hurt came across his face. His arms fell down and he soon turned, walking away, that grin ever present. Iruka turned towards Ayame, confusion riddling his face. She looked at him with the same expression, then it dawned on her. She reached into her apron and pulled out the check, placing the paper down, writing a number, then turned it towards Iruka. His eyes widened at the amount, and he bolted up in his chair, taking a look down the street, only to find Naruto long gone. Damn it, Naruto. I'm in department now. The man screamed, furious. Said boy was already at his apartment door, his grin toned down to a smile as he turned the knob, coming into his apartment, closing the door being him. He put his hands in his pockets and was about to walk towards the bathroom to take a shower, when a crinkle sound reached his ears. Paper. He fished around in his pocket and pulled out a small piece folded up. Unraveling it, he found it was a note, to him no less. Why was there a note in his pocket? When did it get there? Last night? And why did the handwriting look girly in his opinion? Then, it hit him. A shrill roar piercing the air, a beautiful woman, him forming clones, it all came back, the night before. He began reading the note, seeking more information, wanting to know who that woman was. The more he read, the more he looked for answers, the more questions he had. What was Soul Society? Why did she call herself a Soul Reaper? Apparently, she was coming back too? What was going on? Naruto walked over to a trash bin and dropped the note in, dragged his feet into his room, collapsing face first on his bed, and gave a groan. He mumbled out a sharp curse and flipped over, his forearm crossing over his eyes to shade himself from the flickering light bulb. I wonder when she'll be here, if she's real. Naruto spoke aloud, thinking he was going nuts. For all he knew, someone planted that note on him, just to mess with him. And that, hollow, he thought was just a fevered dream when he was knocked out by something, somehow. He just wanted to forget it all, leave well enough alone, forget the dream and note, sleep, and wake up for the team assignments tomorrow, be the shinobi he was meant to be. He moved his arm and saw the light was still fading in and out. I just changed that, why? And it shattered, making Naruto jump up in surprise, drawing a kunai out of instinct, holding its point in a reverse grip. As he looked on, his tense muscles loosened a little, just slightly. But his eyes impossibly widened. He remembered her, no one could forget such a being as she. Her black kimono-like clothes separated and opened at the chest, enough to let his mind go sue. Naruto coughed, clearing his head with a shake. Tilda. Rangaku Matsumoto crooned a greeting. Don't, hey, me lady. You just broke into my house. He felt indignation crawl up his back. Oh come on Naruto, she sang, if I'm taking the week off just to train you, can't I have some hospitality? She winked, like last night, only this time, more playful, pointing a finger up at him. The whiskered blonde looked down to her sides and not at her sides mind you and saw suitcases stacked there, as if she knew he couldn't reject him. No way, you can't barge in and expect me to. His tongue fell limp in his mouth, parched and dry as she leaned over, holding the edges of the top of her kimono attire, preparing to part the veils to T2. Naruto looked away, head turned, yet his eyes wandered back a few times whilst he stuttered worse than a lamb. If you don't let me stay, she began her sweetly voiced threat, pulling the curtains of cloth a slight, I'll make you Tilda. Her voice was intoxicating, and her actions persuading. She tugged a little more, threatening to lay bare herself. Okay, just don't run around here naked. His voice was high, whiskered cheeks flushed crimson, and his eyes darted like flies, up to her grinning face and down towards her large chest. She stood more upright, pulling the kimono a bit tighter, still leaving him in well enough sight of her ample blessings. She grabbed hold of her suitcases, and as she walked out of the room, looked back for a moment to smile cheekily at him, then walked out towards the front room. Naruto's back hit the wall, the kunai clattered to the ground, and he slumped to the pillow on his bed, very unsure of life and all of its animosities. Rangaku returned shortly after, wearing hay-colored pajamas with little sheep dotting the top and bottom halves, jumping over fences and such. Her curves were defined even more now, giving Naruto full view to her assets, as it were. You really are moving in, aren't you? Just for the week, all 7 days, just for you. She told, smiling gently for once. His head bowed briefly, then shot up, a bit of concern on his face. Then where'll you sleep? Her eyes drifted to his bed. Oh come on lady, please? Rangaku asked, not too flirtatious this time around. Where will I sleep then? She shrugged. He about fell out of the bed. And then she giggled. It was a sweet sound, like chimes rustled beneath the wake of a gentle wind, but it bowed him to her will nonetheless, just enough that he came off the bed and let her be. She skipped towards it and hopped up onto it. Rangaku flipped around, sat up, swung her legs over the edge, and beckoned him closer. Hey, tomorrow, I promise I'll teach you some things. Her voice was sincere, but the words prompted him to ask. What exactly are you gonna teach me? I'm already a ninja, what else is there to learn? She arched a brow at him, then lowered it, then smiled that brilliant smile, pointing to one last case she left in his room. It was long and slim, so it didn't have clothes that much he could tell, But when he looked back at her, her face was stern. When you open that case, and hold what is inside, you will wield a weapon capable of immense feats. Do not open, until we finish your training. Naruto took a fumbling step back, seeing a side of this beauty he hadn't yet seen before. Got it? She asked, still serious. He nodded, with a gulp. Okay Tilda. And with that, her bubbly self was back. Laying down on the bed, allowing her voluptuous hair to cascade out. She shifted back onto his pillow, wrapped herself up in his sheets, and smiled brightly at him. Your training begins tomorrow, so don't forget. He told her that he was going to be at the academy, getting assigned to a genin team, to which she shrugged off and said, I guess you'll have to work into the night then. She smiled gently, as if to say that it couldn't be that bad. He nodded, smiling too, wishing her a good night's sleep. He walked away and came into his lounging room, where off in one corner lay her suitcases. He ignored them and took off his jumpsuit and equipment, leaving him in his frog-headed boxers, and jumped into the couch. He stretched, letting his bones pop, as he lay down across its cushioned surface. I wonder what kind of training she'll have me do, he thought, curiously. Naruto awoke with a start. Something was off, something in the air was strange, as if the oxygen was filtered through with a screen. Off in the other room, he could hear a strange sound, a rapid ticking, and a grumble. A curse came to his ears, and then a shattering smash, stopping the ringing. A contented sigh, barely audible through the walls, came to him. Then next what came, was of snoring. What the? Then it came to him, the alarm. The alarm he had set. The alarm he set for the morning. The very one that he'd probably have to replace now after a certain curvious woman smashed it. Oh shit. Naruto cursed fully and sprung up in his froggy boxers, flipped over the couch more like tumbled face first and sprinted over to his bedroom closet. His feet thudded to a stop as he nearly ripped the sliding closet door off its hinges, looking for the right clothes. All before him were a line of orange jumpsuits, each with that same high white collar. Behind him, Rangaku groaned over his rustling noises, peeking under her lids to see a nearly stark nude Naruto. In her groggy state, she merely raised a brow to it, then closed her eyes a moment later. Then, she opened her eyes again, half-lidded, and grinned cheekily. If I didn't know any better, I would think you were giving me a show. Her voice purred out teasingly, making the boy jump in surprise. Then he shrank in embarrassment. Then annoyance came and mixed itself in as a red tint filtered across his whiskered visage. Hey, I'm the only one allowed to be the pervert here. Who said I was the pervert? You're the one giving the show. Rangaku's sassy reply came next, filling the boy with frustration. He wanted to have a comeback, say something that'd wipe that smirk off her face, but with nothing popping up in his head, he simply growled under his breath. He whipped around and grabbed his jumpsuit, zipped up, and reached down for his sandals. A sharp whistle came next, a catcall, and yet another flush came dancing across his face. He quickly put on his sandals, grabbed his headband, and got ready to leave when the Soul Reaper called for him. Naruto, don't forget the suitcase, bring it with you to that forest we first met. Why can't you? He snapped back, still flustered with her teasing him. Ah, Naruto, you don't expect a beautiful woman like me to carry such a heavy thing, do you? Her voice wasn't pleading, more complaining than anything, but it held that chime sound that bent him to her will. He grabbed the thing up and left, grumbling about lazy freeloaders. On his way out the door, he grabbed the rest of his gear, kunai and shuriken alike, and other such things. He walked down the street at a leisurely pace, ignoring the glances and scowls he got, only smiling bigger, knowing that he was about to get a team. 2 people and a sensei, 3 who would witness him, know him not as that. He was the jailer of the 9 tails, and although the knowledge explained why people gave him the cold shoulder and wouldn't open up their hearts to him, that didn't make any of it better. But, he supposed, it could be worse. He could have been the fox himself, could be trapped and never to be let out, never to taste freedom, never to see the world through his own eyes. The thought ran a cold chill through his spine. Soon, he made it to the academy, stepping through its doors he'd stepped through thousands of times before. Walked the halls he'd walked many times. But this time, instead of trepidation because he failed before, he strode with pride, joy in his heart, knowing that he succeeded. No more would he see failure, no, for he would only know glory and victory. In the end, he was just a damned happy fellow. He opened the door to class, looking to his right, seeing Iruka. The man nodded a greeting, smiling. Naruto returned the gesture, giving a thumbs up. The whiskered blonde came over to a seat, next to a brooding Uchiha, whose only acknowledgement was a "hem." Naruto grinned and chuckled a little. He put the long case on the table and rested his feet on the atop that, leaning back a bit on the hind legs of the chair, arms crossed and fingers laced behind his neck. He was content, just the same as everyone took their seats, ready to get going with his ninja business, though a few gave a glance towards the case, confused, then decided it wasn't all that important. It was just Naruto, what was the worst he could do? Then he heard shouting, a thud of rushing feet, arguing that grew closer. He recognized those voices, Sakura and Ino. The pinkhead and blonde, both extremely terrifying when they desired to be. Something told him, just as they burst through the door, that he shouldn't be sitting where he was sitting. But he couldn't put a finger on it. Why should he move? He couldn't think of why, after all, he was just sitting next to. For the second time that day, Naruto cursed. And the wrath of two girls came down on him. Launched from his chair like a rocket, he was. His face being slammed against by two white-knuckled kunoichi, his body rising to the ceiling before falling onto the floor below. The back of his head struck first. Funny how that happened so often, and the rest of his body bounced from the sheer force. It was then he remembered why he didn't sit next to Sasuke, because of two overly obsessed girls. That'll teach you to sit next to Sasuke-kun. The pinkhead roared about like a hollow then. Yeah, Ino seconded. They looked to one another, just for a moment, then both began shouting once more, arguing who'd sit next to the boy they so admired, leaving Naruto to grumble. He stood and brushed himself off, grabbed the suitcase and sat next to Choji and the lazy Nara. Rough day, huh? Shikamaru asked. Frickin' freeloaders persuading me, calling me a pervert. Damned kunoichi and their obsessions, and double damned frickin' hollows starting all this. Naruto continued on, mumbling obscenities, making Shikamaru and Choji to scoot a bit further away, wishing not to aggravate the livid blonde any further. Iruka eventually shouted at the two with that strange big-headed technique, making them sit down and grumble, and soon without any further interruptions he began reading off the lists of people that'd be together in a team, and the sensei they would be assigned to. One by one, they were named off, their team leader as it were came in, taking them somewhere to do something. Eventually, in the middle of Naruto's mumbling rant, Iruka called his, Sakura, and Sasuke's names. And your sensei will be, oh, well, it will be Kakashi Hatake. You may be here for a while. And then Iruka left, and when Naruto looked, it was only the three of them. He raised a brow to this but shrugged, sitting down and propping his feet up again, deciding to relax until their sensei came, forgetting the incident earlier. His thoughts began to drift, and his simple relaxing began to fall into slumber. Hey Naruto, wake up! A yell brought him back, jerking his muscles into action, accidentally kicking the suitcase off the table. He looked left and right, and scowled a little. Sakura, what was that for? The pinkette blinked, shrank back, then pointed to the suitcase. It was starting to glow, and he didn't know what was happening. She told, actual trepidation still in her voice. He turned towards the case and saw that it was not glowing, but instead, it was slightly ajar. Oh no. Naruto got up and kneeled before it, ready to simply shut and lock it, but retracted his hand when indeed it began to emit a light from itself. Sakura got up and pointed at him, as if in her own accusation, telling him she were right. But Naruto didn't hear her. He didn't hear Sasuke get up and look down with actual interest, didn't hear them step closer to him and the light-bearing case. All he could hear was the whispers. Someone, their tone a deep drum beat, graveled with a scent of power and strength. It called out to him, wishing, pleading to be held, to be used, to do as he wanted. Naruto's hands fell on the case, but he did not close the case, no, instead, he opened it. Light did not pour forth and shoot into the sky. Nothing jumped out at him, instead, the light stopped, ceased to brill out. What he found was a simple katana, a standard-looking piece, only shined enough to gleam. Yet still, the voice persisted, as his hands came down onto its simple handle. The voice no longer a whisper, now only a stern voice of action, saying only 3 words. Say my name. Inside the gleam of the blade, he saw a reflection of a balding man, middle-aged, squared glasses and flannel shirt with brown jacket. Below he wore simple jeans and dirty boots. He and Naruto stared at one another, the man squinting in the scenery of a desert. The whiskered blonde hadn't noticed that he had already picked the blade up, but he did notice its change in size. The simple-looking katana had grown longer than his own height, yet it still retained the very same style, single edge with a flat guard. Naruto began to mumble something, maybe the being name, but was snapped out of his daze by a shouting Sakura. That sword. It's such a strange shape and size. Naruto turned to her, wanted to say something she'd hit him for, but stayed his tongue. He turned back to the sword, finding the reflection gone, the balding man, the desert behind him, gone. A pang of sadness hit him then, for some reason, wishing to know the name of the man he'd seen. It was odd, the connectiveness he'd felt, as if they were the one and the same, despite the appearances. In the end, he could do nothing but let it go, for now. He sat back down, laying the sword on the table, staring at it for a little bit, before finally relaxing once more. "Hey, where did you get that anyway?" Sakura asked, quite curiously in fact. With a sigh, he said, "I have no clue where it came from, but he stopped, realizing that if he told Sakura that a woman of such curves gave him this, in the way he was going to say it, he'd be punched hard. "A nice lady gave this to me." She looked at him for a moment, then shrugged, thinking the thing had been hanged to make it look impressive. "Okay," she said at last, as she and Sasuke sat back down. Back at Naruto's, Rangaku was just starting to get up, her slim belly growling with hunger. She groaned, sat up, and groaned some more. "Why didn't I have him make me breakfast?" She hopped out, agile as a cat, and strode towards the kitchen, her objective, a strange concoction of food that only she would enjoy, so long as they weren't bamboo shoots, nasty things. Rangaku made it to the kitchen, tying an apron around her waist, and got to making herself something good. She grabbed a pot and began putting eggs, leek, and everything else in the kitchen went flying into the pot as she added more strange foods into the odd concoction. A few minutes later, she was finished, and took the contents out of her pot and onto a plate, breathing deeply of its delicious smell. She was about to gobble it down when it hit her, a spiritual pressure she hadn't quite felt before. She got up from her shock, starting for her Shinigami clothes when the power began to rise even higher, then, it stopped. Mouth ajar, she turned towards the direction she felt the power come from, and in that moment knew who it was, with the slight familiarity she already had with it. He opened the case. She looked back at the bowl of purple slop she called breakfast, then back towards where Naruto exhibited his spiritual pressure. "Tisk, damn kid. I hope he didn't blow up the academy." And she sat back down, eating her food. Back at the school, Naruto sneezed, rousing himself from slight slumber, then felt a chill run down his spine. What was that just now? He felt as though someone had mentioned him, and not in a pleasant manner either. But he shrugged it off, grabbed the large sword on his desk, and headed for the window. When he parked his feet atop the window sill, sitting on his haunches, Sakura asked what he was doing. "I'm tired of waiting, I'm gonna go on the roof and train," he told, about to leap out of the building side. "Why would you practice with a henge?" He stopped, head tilted back, eyes squinted at her, as if in question. "You think this is a henge?" And he left, with both Sakura and Sasuke confused and the latter intrigued. Naruto climbed his way atop the building, making it to the roof, and began to swing the massive sword. He didn't right know how to really use a sword, though they did do extensive training involving kunai, and went with what felt right. He found that with begrudgedness his short stature would not allow an upswing, unless his intention was to tear up the roof or ground he stood on. But, he found that a small jump gave him enough room to do so, if not improve it. Eventually, because of this small discovery, he found that instead of swinging with his arm, he should swing with his whole body. The transfer of energy, despite his small frame, made more force, due to his weight and mass being used in the swing. From then on, he began doing that, noticing how, no matter how far out he placed the sword from even one hand, he felt no weight, as if it were not but a feather, despite its enormous size. Meh, devil in the details, so many details. He pulled his arm back, sword pointed to the sky, and swung. Wow, he stopped his swing in time, hanging its edge dangerously close to someone he didn't know. The man was tall, lanky, and had gray hair lopsided to the side, spiking at the ends. He had a headband on, the leaf symbol and all, covering one of his eyes, like a patch, whilst a blue mask covered the lower half. He wore the standard, green flak jacket with pouches at the sides, and below he wore the navy blue pants and sandals. "Hey, watch where you shunshin, I could have cut you," Naruto shouted, angry that someone stopped his training. The man in question went from a surprised look to that of a calm chill, holding out a peace sign. "Yo!" Sakura and Sasuke appeared next to him as Naruto pulled his sword away, resting it in the roof's top with a palm on the pommel. "Don't kill the teacher, Naruto!" Sakura screamed, miffed that he almost killed the man, though her inner Sakura wished he had at least bonked the man for being late. While he should watch for, "Wait, sensei? He's our teacher?" Kakashi had Taki face palmed then, soon after bringing his head back up to say, "You're all idiots." After a certain incident involving nearly cutting his sensei in two, Naruto was thoroughly questioned about his sword, his teammates and Kakashi getting on his case about its origins. He told them all they needed to know, that a kind lady gave him this, and told him that he could train with it. It was a half-truth, which was the best kind of lie, and so it seemed they believed him. Or at least, Sakura was content with that. Sasuke and Kakashi were suspicious, but let it be as it was, for now. With that over, their team leader went on and asked them some questions about themselves, however remaining secretive in his own past. They thought it was unfair, but he waved it off and asked the pinkhead. She looked to Sasuke several times and mumbled insensible things, to which the man groaned and pointed towards Naruto instead. "Huh, me," the boy blinked, then grinned like a shark. "Well, I am gonna be the next Hokage, Datbayo. And then everyone will acknowledge how awesome I am." The boy went on, telling him all that he'd do. When he eventually stopped, Kakashi had to clean out his ear because of all the shouting. He pointed towards Sasuke next, and asked him the same question. "I have no interests, and what you could call a dream, it's more of an ambition. You see, there's a certain man I will kill." His onyx eyes drew colder, fixating on a memory from his past, and his fingers clenched tighter. Everyone looked on at him, eyes wide and a bit put off by his words, all for except Kakashi. With all introduced, Kakashi told them that there would be a test tomorrow, down at a training ground. He went on to give specific instructions, of what time to be there, early morning, and that they were suggested not to eat, because they may puke. They all moaned about it, cursing slightly, but nodded nonetheless as he dismissed them for home. Naruto did go home, seeing if Rangaku was still sleeping and being lazy. To his surprise, she was not home, and instead there was a note, saying that she was in the forest they had met, and it told him that as soon as he read it, he should head there, with the sword. Wondering how she knew that he had uncased the blade, Naruto left for the woods, slightly sheepish. If she knew he had opened the case, then what would she do? She said not to, unless he was ready, but then again, maybe he wasn't in trouble. Maybe it was when he learned the name of that guy in the sword, maybe that was the power she was talking about. He eventually made it, back to the shed they had met, though now it lay in shambles, yet she was nowhere in sight. "Hello Naruto Tilda." A soft whisper in his ear made Naruto leap high, then he turned, facing the blessed Buxamed broad. "Hey, don't sneak up on a guy like that," he shouted, feeling his heart pound faster, from the soft whisper or the surprise, he couldn't tell. She ignored him and instead inspected the sword. She was surprised by the size, seeing as how he was about as tall as her captain, but knew that he just had enough control over his Ryuko that it wasn't any bigger. When she got close enough, she found that he, in fact, had not activated his true Shikai, probably why it still looked like a katana in style. When she asked him about it, he said that he had heard a voice, rough and powerful, and it beckoned him to speak its name. Rangaku took a pose of thought and came up with an idea. "Alright, you weren't supposed to open the case and wield the sword, but at least you didn't destroy anything. That's why I brought you here, so that any destruction caused would be unimportant." "But how are we gonna train?" Naruto asked, curious. Rangaku grinned, a Cheshire grin that bespelled enjoyment for her, but unpleasantness for him. He saw this, and quivered as she drew her sword, holding it with two hands, aloft and in front of her. White Ryotsu began to burst around her, a swirling mass of flame it was, and a pressure built over him, as if his body was filling with lead. Then, she spoke. "Right now, your objective is to stay alive, don't forget that, as I come after you." And the white aura burst into an inferno as she lunged at him, enveloping Naruto in a weight he could only just fight against. But through the fear that began to burn in him, the terror the gnawed at his heels, he remained defiant. Standing his ground, even as her sword landed against his. He fell to a knee, on the verge of collapse, just from that grinding clash, but kept his sword up, blocking the continued strike. She pulled back, and threw her sword at him again, and he blocked that way too. Rangaku slid his sword above his head and kicked him in the chest, sending him into the trees, an impromptu rocket of orange he was as he crashed down into the ground. He stood a moment later, his legs swaying beneath him as Rangaku came out flying like a banshee, upswinging her blade against his. He could barely meet her blade with enough force to block, and Naruto found himself whip-lashing from the blow. Rangaku threw swing after swing at him, and he barely blocked them, and a few times he nearly found his head rolling down a hill, but Naruto was stubborn. Naruto persisted, despite the fear. Naruto kept at it, realizing that he had to keep blocking, find an opening, something. But no matter what, he knew that he could never take his eyes off of Rangaku, because when he did, she would punish him, swing harder, forcing him to pay attention to her and everything she did. Then, he caught her off guard. He had finally found an opening, and he took full advantage of it. Swinging down, he passed through her guard, cutting something, he didn't know what, he was too enwrapped in the fight to rightly know. Soon after, he brought his sword back up in defense, ready to parry any oncoming attacks, ones that never came. The world came back into focus, and Naruto could now see why she stopped attacking him. He hadn't cut her, no, instead, he had cut her obi, that wrap that kept her clothes on even though the top was already about open. But now, she clutched the rest of what was left to her chest, keeping him from seeing what was there, but she failed to cover her behind, which stuck out enough for him to see. Gah! He screamed, cowering back, assuming that she'd punch him or cut him down for what he did. Instead, he found she was scolding herself. Huh, I knew I should have put more effort into it, man, now I had to go and replace my robes. She looked to him, her angry glare still present, but soon it dissolved into a soft peer of the eyes, as if she decided it was a good swing. You did good, kid. Most people under that kind of pressure would be overwhelmed at first, but you held on through it. A pretty smile lit up her face as she walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder whilst the other remained over her large chest. That will be enough training for now, let's go back and have lunch. He nodded, trying in vain to keep his eyes off Rangaku's ample behind. If she noticed he was staring, she did little to dissuade it from him, as she flash-stepped home with him in hand. He asked how she did that, and she said she would teach him later, for now they needed to eat and get ready for tomorrow. Naruto told her about the bell test tomorrow and she told him that, whenever he came back, they would train, as with any other time. She changed into simple citizen clothes, and had him cook some ramen, find a whole stockpile of it earlier, and proceeded to eat once it was done. When night came, Rangaku asked if he'd like to sleep in his bed with her. Embarrassed, he said no. She laughed, and said she trusted him, and said that even if he did try anything, your Zanpakuto will find itself half its size. Reluctant, especially after that, he nodded, striping to his boxers as she hopped in before him, thankfully wearing her sheep pajamas. He got in next, whiskered cheeks redder than a ripe tomato, resting his heated head against the pillow. Naruto felt her shift around, her back to his, ready for sleep too. But, just as he found himself nodding off, she spoke softly, a quiet tone of reprieve leaving her gentle lips. You know, I wouldn't really hurt you, Naruto. You're just a kid after all. He wanted to shout at her, deny that he was a kid, show her that he wasn't by challenging her to another fight. But, surprising himself, he kept silent, feeling down, deep down in him, that at the touch of her words, it rung a bell of truth. Naruto stared on into the darkening room, silent in his own mind, letting sleep take him with spirits down. Naruto found himself awake a moment later, as if no time had passed, as if he had only closed his eyes a moment ago, having only a sleepless dream. It took but a half-second for him to draw in his senses, as his bleary eyes cleared. He felt as though he had rested his head against the softest pillow yet. Or, was it too? He tried to move out of bed and get ready for the bell test, but found that he couldn't. He looked down, and saw a pair of slim arms wrapped firmly over his small frame. He was about to remove them when they moved up and over his head, turning his face round to the two soft pillows, which turned out to be Rangaku's melanous chest. Naruto nearly lost his mind then, being so close to such grandness. How did she not have back problems? The whiskered blonde could only writhe within her iron grip, unable to get out of such valleys as these. But he needed to go soon, or he'd be late. What was he to do? Then it came to him. With as much strength as he could muster, he reached up with one of his hands, and grabbed her side with a pinching force. Blue eyes snapped open and a shriek filled the air as a surprised Matsumoto jumped, not in pain, but in the nerve-twisting pinch that made about anyone jump. She raised a fist by instinct, and accidentally punched Naruto through one of his walls. Dry wall and plaster exploded in a shower of cough-inducing dust. A moment later, she leapt out of the bed, hair frizzled like a banshee, as she rushed to his side. She yelled his name whilst shaking him like a rag doll, asking if he were okay. Naruto. No, I think I killed him. You, idiot, stop shaking me. Ah, where is his soul? Naruto. She dropped his body, looking about. I'm still alive. And she descended like a harpy, grabbing him again into her chest, turning side to side, crying out that she was sorry. He eventually pulled away, flustered, and went to grab his sword, taking it up and already walking out the door. Rangaku called after, but he kept striding away, deliberately ignoring her. He was at the door, and he stopped, tilting his head back at her, eyes perched in a heated glare. A bit of hurt still left in those sapphiric orbs. The door slammed shut behind him as he stormed away, leaving a crestfallen Rangaku behind. Naruto climbed the buildings, hoping to make it to the training ground before Kakashi, which he doubted he would be later than him, but he sped on regardless. He leapt across the gaps between the roofs with minimal effort, sword resting on his shoulder as he did so. Naruto's mind began to wander as he rushed through the air, thinking on all that was occurring. One day, a curvy woman came along and broke the chain of his destiny, so it seemed. She gave him a sword, is training him, living within his own apartment, sleeping in his bed. Hell, she even snuggled with him. But something was wrong. He could feel something sinister laying overhead, like some great beast, perched, just waiting for the right moment to pluck him out of the sky. Thoughts aside, he eventually made it to the forest, those ponderings still swimming in his head. Naruto found the clearing of the training ground, spotting both his teammates, yet no sign of their new sensei. He greeted the two, and they greeted back, though they also glanced up at his sword. He noticed and asked what they were thinking, seeing that a perplexed stare had settled on their faces. It's just that, Sakura began, that sword of yours, we get a strange feeling from it. Sasuke finished, nodding along with Sakura. Naruto blinked. Listen, this is a gift from someone, so don't go around telling everyone about it. Naruto told, hoping they'd agree, his voice a bit commanding. They did, but they also pushed the matter, asking who the lady was, or if she was still around. He told them that she was a nice woman, and that she just happened about and was leaving soon, telling them that he didn't know where she was. Sakura gave up, but Sasuke didn't. The Avenger secretly reminded himself to follow Naruto after this bell test was over. Naruto walked a bit away from them, sitting cross-legged with his blade rested over his legs. Putting both hands on his zanpakuto, he relaxed, knowing that their teacher wouldn't be here in an hour or so. Soon, relaxing turned to sleep. And sleep turned to, why am I in a desert? Sure enough, he found himself sitting in the middle of a never-ending sandy area. Sandstone jutting out like fingers piercing through the dry surface of the land. The only thing he could see was orange and tan, for miles and miles, not a cloud in the sun-beating sky. Then, in the fluctuating air, he saw a figure, one he only saw once before, only yesterday. Naruto stood, peering through the heat, trying to get a better view of the man. Hey, Naruto called out, hoping to catch the man's attention. The man remained still, and if he looked close enough, Naruto saw the man's back was to him. He called out once more, louder, with a hand cupped to the side of his mouth. Still, remained the man, and Naruto, he grew slightly frustrated. He walked over towards the man now, just to see who he was. The man turned suddenly, on the heel of his boot, his vivid eyes glaring into Naruto's with an angry scrutiny. Gya. Naruto retracted himself, stepping away from the man as if bit by his stare. A scowl burrowed itself through the man then, an ashamed grimace on his old wrinkled face. So you are my wielder. His voice was rough, deep like a bass drum, holding a no-nonsense tone. What a disappointment. Naruto instantly went from weariness to offended, getting up in the man's face, yelling at the old guy, screaming. What did ya mean by that? Huh, bud? Naruto brought his arm back, snapping his fist forth with a twist, giving it his all. Smack! The sharp sound of white knuckle meeting calloused palm rung in Naruto's ears a moment later, deafening him, blue eyes widening and mouth hanging agape. He tried to retract himself, pull his arm back and get some distance, but the man's iron grip shackled him there. Naruto jerked back continually, trying to break free. Soon, jerking turned to thrashing, and streams of curses left his lips, as if they were to help in his freedom. "Let go, old man," Naruto screamed. "Do you think with that kind of power, that you have any control over me?" His assailant spoke, authority to his voice. The boy stopped, peering up at the man with scrutiny. "Who are you?" It was as if a switch had been flipped. The man let go. Naruto fell on his backside. And the man's glaring scowl softened. A tired sigh came from the wrinkled man in flannel. Then, he spoke, softer, not rough, with overwhelming superiority that mocked Naruto. It was something close to a fatherly glance, stern, yet soft. "I am your Zanpakuto spirit, right now, you yield an Asachi. This sword is soft, without a purpose, but when you speak my name, you will gain power from me." His gaze raised, into the cloudless sky, as if to divine something from there. The old man looked back down. "My name is..." A silence beheaded what left he was to say, bleeped out and dry were the words, at least to Naruto. "What?" I said, "my name is..." Once more, it happened, and Naruto scowled just the same as the man. "Oh, so it seems, you are not ready. Maybe, some other time." The man began to fade, from feet to head, just like the desert, leaving a black void behind. Naruto panicked, even as the man said that they would be in contact with one another. Just as the miasma of darkness was to consume the whole of the place, the old man included, Naruto shouted out. "What should I call you till then?" The old man peered at Naruto, glancing up and down the boy, picking apart what the boy was, until he finally, with a gleam of a smile, looked Naruto right in the eyes, and said this. "Walter." Naruto woke from the strange world, blinking his bleary eyes from the clouds of sleep. Then he felt a poke. Several pokes. Someone was poking him insistently. "Why? Stop doing that." A girly scream filled the air with a horrendous wail, forcing all but the screamer to cringe in pain. "Ow!" Kakashi deadpanned, clearing his ear with a pinky. Sasuke and Naruto second that, both nodding with the Jonin. Eventually things got back on track, and Kakashi began explaining what was going to happen. First, they had a set time to get 2 bells, and the one who doesn't, gets sent back to the academy. Sakura and Naruto both hated the thought, whilst Sasuke seemed unaffected, more or less determined to get the test done and over with. Kakashi set the timer and told them to go ahead, to come at him with everything they had, with the intent to kill. All of them leapt back into the trees instead, completely hidden. "Well, at least they have stealthed down." A cough brought his attention backwards. "Except you seem content on being so revealed." "Well, I ain't the normal shinobi." Naruto Uzumaki bellowed, bringing his sword down, to point its deadly tip at the masked man. "I'm gonna be the next Hokage, Datbeo. And if you don't believe in me," here he pulled his blade back across his side, "you're about out of luck." And he swung. "That wasn't very nice, Naruto." An ominous voice arose from behind him, and Naruto saw him make the tiger seal, 2 fingers tightly held and poised behind him. He thrust his fingers forward, ready to poke Naruto severely hard right in the spot most men preferred others stay clear away from. Naruto swung his sword back, cutting deep into the earth, blocking the fingers with the flat of his blade. Kakashi drew back, surprised by the move, but stilled himself, knowing the boy was just as surprised that he was attacked in such a way. With Naruto pulling his blade from the earth, Kakashi adopted his cool-headed demeanor once more and reached in his back pouch. Thinking he was going to bring out a kunai or shuriken, Naruto brought his sword up to block, only falter when instead, the man brought out a pervy book. Shinobi Rule of Fighting No. 1, Taijutsu. Naruto's mouth hung agape, so much so that a fly could come in and out, and he would never know. "Are you making fun of me?" Naruto shouted the next second, anger brilling up his spine, muscles taut and rearing up like a sprain. Then he moved, so fast, the air rushing past him was too much. Too fast, too fast. Naruto skidded to a stop, turned around, and found that Kakashi was nowhere in sight. In fact, he was lost himself. What was that just now? Was that flash step? Had he just performed flash step? But he had done it too well now, and he couldn't see the others or the clearing. Then, he decided that maybe this could be an advantage to him. Maybe their sensei was just as surprised as he was. But Naruto wasn't surprised now he had an advantage. All he had to do was take some time and practice this new ability, just take a bit of what time he had, so that he could beat that unnervingly calm man into the dust. Back in the clearing, Kakashi was surprised, and so too was Sakura and Sasuke, all three very surprised. First it's a sword, then it's a mysterious woman, now he does this? It wasn't quite a shunshin, that's teleporting, but this is something else entirely. It was a high-speed move, that's for sure, but of what? The Hitaki pondered aloud, putting his book away. His senses screamed at him a moment later, and he leapt back as a hail of kunai plunged into the dirt right where he had been. Kakashi whirled around and smacked away a pale fist before it could collide with the back of his head. Next he ducked beneath a swirling kick, and brought out his own foot, knocking his assailant over. Sasuke whirled back up, unfazed, launching fists at the man. Kakashi blocked some, brushed others to the side, and caught one. Holding tightly, he rolled back, slamming the boy into the ground with a harsh thud. Kakashi brought out a kunai and threw it at the boy, only for the Uchiha to poof into a log. My students appear smarter than they really are. Soon after that, Kakashi walked away into the timber, deciding that if they were to even come close to getting the bells, they'd have to come after him. A few more minutes in, and Naruto had gotten used to the flash step, not to say he had completely mastered it, but that he was comfortable when he did it, and now could go where he wished. With this move in hand, and his sword in the other, he began searching for the Hitaki. He found the man, setting up a trap, one so that if stepped on, it would wrap around the leg and string them up in the tree. Naruto noted that and grinned. Out of the brush he leapt, sword behind him, trailing in his wake. Kakashi was put off guard by this, even as that sword was swung, its passing cutting the air and making it scream a whistle of pain. The man barely had time to bring out his kunai. And that was it, he blocked as best he could, but Naruto had the leverage, and he could do nothing as he was shoved down into the ground. Gotcha bitch. Kakashi regained his senses after that and slugged Naruto across the face. The boy stumbled back with a bloody nose, spat out some blood along with a nasty curse and flung himself at the Jonin once more, and Kakashi did the same. As they fought, the Hitaki felt that something was wrong. How could the supposed dead last come out of nowhere and start fighting him with the same tenacity as a low-level chunin at the least? How did he perform that technique as well? It wasn't one he had seen before. Maybe if he used his Sharingan he'd be able to find out. A point was proven to him, one that he should have always kept in mind. Never stop focusing on the enemy. He ducked, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A whoosh of air hurtled overhead, and yet, as he whirled with the kunai out, he hit nothing but air. This went on for some time, Kakashi so dedicated to keeping the boy at bay with minor ease and Naruto flash-stepping around him. Then, as Kakashi was about to take out his Sharingan, the boy was gone. Just like that, poof, gone. He stood up straight, looking around for the whiskered blonde. He couldn't find him, but, as he put his kunai back in the pouch, he felt it. Or, it's better to say, what he didn't feel. I got the bells. Naruto shouted out back in the clearing, looking around for his teammates. Black and pink flew out of the tree line the next moment. What? Sakura screeched, mouth agape. How did you? Sasuke asked next. Naruto became a blur one moment, the next he was back, smiling gently. Something I picked up, Naruto told, grinning now. A moment of silence passed between them. So, where are the bells? His grin increased. Meh, I can go through the academy again. He told with animosity, striding away. As he walked away, they felt inside their pockets, a realization dawning on them. No, Sakura admonished. He did. Sasuke spoke, just as surprised. He had left them the bells and therefore, allowing them to pass, but not him. So shocked were they, that they could not move. Until Kakashi leapt from the trees like a banshee. You! He shouted at the top of his lungs, landing and kidding to a stop in front of them. Pass, he said next. Kakashi explained to them all that this was not a test to see if they could get the bells, but to work as a team, that those who do not follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends are lower than trash. After that, the week went on, with them doing D-rank missions, and Naruto doing Rangaku's training. He told her all that he had accomplished, with the bells and the flash step. She was proud of him and spoke well of him, praising how well he was coming along. But she also reminded him that there was still a lot for him to do, like learning his Shikai and Bankai. He understood what she meant, and so the week went. He slept in the bed with her still, but nothing happened. Well, she still cuddled, and would hug him into her breasts, which by the end of the week, he didn't mind it at all. But it was at the end of the week that she had to leave, and he was sad to see her go, but she assured him that she would try and get another one off soon. After bidding her farewell, he sat in his room that evening, finding that the apartment felt empty, hollow if you will. Maybe it wasn't the apartment, maybe it was him. He missed Rangaku already. The next day, when he and his team went to get another mission, he flat out refused to do yet another mundane D rank. They tried to explain to him that going on higher missions were for higher ranked nin, that going out half-cocked was a bad idea. "I don't care," Naruto yelled at them. "We got the bells from Kakashi, we passed, and we've been doing dumb missions for far too long." He couldn't tell if the old man was mad, or just considering his words then. "I guess it can't be helped, Tazuna, come in." Apparently it was the later as Sarutobi called out for someone. Out came an old man, wearing an old straw hat and glasses. He was wrinkled, much the same as Sarutobi, and had a bottle of sake in his hand. "The short one looks stupid," was his rough words. Naruto looked around, and saw that he was the shortest, therefore. "I'll kill him." Kakashi held the boy by his collar, holding in a chuckle as he swung his blade about with ease, anything to reach the man. "Naruto, we can't go around and kill the clients, just hold that anger in until we see a bandit or two." The boy stopped struggling but gave a sour face. Naruto and the others were currently making their way across the wide waters that would lead to the land of waves. Where one might think that they would be ecstatic to be on their mission, nearing its completion, that person would be very misled. In fact, the trio of genin were on edge, having been attacked earlier by two missing nin. Both had a sharp chain gauntlet between them, wrapping that weapon round Kakashi, tearing him to a shredded pulp of a mess, staining the ground crimson. Of course, they failed to account for him being a Junin, a rightly good one at that, as he easily used a log in place of him and overcame the two. After a rough interrogation, and a message sent back to the village to retrieve the two, they were back on their way. But that's not what set them all on edge. Someone of some manner or other had hired the Demon Brothers of the Mist to attack and kill Tazuna, not mere bandits or thugs as this mission was rated. Now, it was a B rank, possibly an A- rank mission, which according to Kakashi, they were not ready for. Naruto begged to differ. He argued that just because some punk nin were trying to kill Tazuna doesn't mean some great lord or emperor was going to come down on them. It wasn't as if entire armies were chasing the man. Plus, Naruto had added after he and the others had dealt with the nin well, just as Kakashi decided to jump right back in and finish it, tying the men up. Reluctant, but eventually, the Hitaki gave in to the boy's persistence. Even with all those words, it did not settle this feeling of dread that began to broil up in them, ready to spill at the drop of a pin. Even Naruto thought that something loomed before them. The closer they came towards the shore, the more it increased. And, if he didn't have his sword, his Zanpakuto, if he didn't have the strength of Walter White by his side, he'd be too frightened to fight such enemies without falling flat on his butt. Shortly thereafter, they arrived in Wave Country. It was a forested land at first, large despite what Kakashi had told them, and with the fact it was called Wave Country. Naruto had assumed that it would have been more or less, well, water. Then again, it was surrounded by the stuff, so there was that, but maybe the farther they got in, the more water they would see. They got off the boat and headed in, hoping to get back to Tazuna's village before any more attacks were wrought unto them, though it was likely someone of a higher ranking was going to be waiting for them for another ambush. As they walked, Naruto heard a rustle in the brush and without thinking, threw a kunai at the sound. The rustle stopped. "Why'd you do that for?" Sakura asked. Naruto realized that the rest were staring at him expectantly. "I thought I heard another." The rustle was heard once more, and he instantly threw another kunai in its direction, eyes gleaming with a serious stare that Kakashi only recognized. There, his lips moved on their own accord, and so too were his feet as he stepped closer towards the silence of where the rustle was once before. His hand struck out, grasping something beneath the shrub, and he yanked it out. "Naruto!" Sakura screeched, "You just killed a bunny." The boy continued to stare at the dead hare with something bordering interest, sensing something was off about the white rabbit. Despite the glare in Sakura's condescending eyes, and the disbelief in the rests, he continued to look the hare over. Kakashi watched Naruto with concernment in his gaze, wondering when those eyes began to show. The eyes of someone who's been hardened by battle, the eyes of someone who, now unafflicted by death, could track and feel out a situation as the boy was now. He wore the same gaze as someone who had seen too much. But that was when things went down. Just as Naruto's eyes lit up with realization, he heard the high-pitched whistle of a sword being swung in the air at a high speed. "Everyone, duck!" he shouted out without thought, dropping the hare and leaping and tackling Sakura down while Kakashi tackled Sasuke and Tazuna to the ground. The blade flew past just as they smacked against the dirt. A moment later they heard a loud thump as the blade sunk its edge into a tree. When they got back up, a man stood there atop the handle of the massive blade, facing away from them, dressed in regular sandals with stripped baggy pants, a headband strapped at an odd angle across his spiked black hair. "So," his chilly voice, filled with malevolent intent, began, "the copycat Kakashi Hitaki, guiding a bridge builder across the land, and oh," his voice hit a chord of intrigue then, as he continued his monologue, "it seems you've taken on a bunch of brats for me to kill, how nice of you." With fear in her voice, Sakura asked Kakashi why the man had called him that, and who the man himself was, stuttering the whole way. "That man," Kakashi told, voice turning hard, "is Zabuza Momoichi, a former ninja of the Hidden Mist. He is of a Jonin level, but he is also known as the Devil of the Mist. He will kill you before you know what's happening." Shock ran through them, electrifying and dulling them all at once, the words of terror striking them with its harsh whips. But Naruto stared on in the face of that hidden devil, something simmering in his gut. He didn't rightly know what it was either. But his brows were furrowed and his eyes hard, it being of such a way that Zabuza actually felt it. The devil knew that stare, that feeling, he knew it in his core. "Killing intent? From one of your students? Well, you truly do live up to my expectations, Kakashi, you've trained them well." Zabuza turned towards where he felt the killing intent, actually having a congratulatory sentence just at the tip of his tongue, when he noticed the sword. He turned fully, eyes glued, wide as dinner plates. Then, they became gleeful and murderous. Someone else with an excessively large blade. How wonderful. The grin behind his face wraps was felt through, even as he leapt out, giant head cleaver in hand, coming down as a wrath filled with bloodlust. Naruto drew his Zanpakuto back. Shane, the Devil of the Mist, met a kunai instead of another large sword, and Kakashi was the one who blocked him, half of his headband lifted to reveal the Sharingan, 3 tomes spinning a furious whirl of black and scarlet. "So you've finally revealed your Sharingan, EH?" the man shouted as they traded swings and blows. Kakashi dipped below, evading the swing of that giant blade, then thrusting his kunai forth, gutting Zabuza. The man had a look of surprise on his face then, as if he didn't expect to be so easily defeated. Kakashi thought that that was it, just as crimson spurted out and painted the ground. Water. What was red suddenly exploded along with the rest of the devil into a splash of water. Shit. The Hitaki barely got out before another kunai was lodged into his throat. First came red, satisfaction from Zabuza, then another explosion of water. What? Zabuza gave a curse just as well, and yet as he did so, another kunai was thrust to his own throat. Red, explosion of water, another curse. Far off into a lake, there he stood, breath hitched with hot anger. "You damn bastard." Kakashi wasted no time and sprinted towards the man, kunai drawn. Zabuza blocked and, with the other's momentum still at hand, threw him across to the other side. The Devil of the Mist quickly sheathed his blade and threw up hand signs, hands speeding through the seals until finally landing on the last one. Water Dragon Blast no Jutsu. Eyes all around widened at what happened next, no more so than Zabuza's. Another dragon of water arose from the lake, meeting that of the missing nins, nullifying each other in great gouts of water, showering back down on the two. Shaking himself from what occurred, he threw another speedy bit of signs, ready to summon mist and enshroud the man and keep that eye of his from copying any more of his moves, when he saw that Kakashi was doing the same signs, at the same time perfectly in sync. "Stop copying me." Zabuza's eyes widened, quite saying what I say. No, no, no. That eye could read both his signs and his voice. You bastard, he shouted, Kakashi bellowing the same thing. At that moment, a thought occurred in his mind, and despite the battle between them, an ornery side awakened in the man. His mouth had already began speaking for him. I'm gay, he shouted, intending to have Kakashi say the same. Instead, his voice fell silent, alone. Even the birds stopped their singing, turning their heads towards the man. Silence. No words. Nothing. Intel. That's nice, was Kakashi's reply. I am going to kill you slowly. Zabuza's voice turned icy cold as he drew his sword. Try me. Kakashi and Zabuza came at one another once more, the fray between them growing ever larger, kunai blocking the head cleaver, spitting sparks between them. Sasuke, Sakura, and Tazuna gazed on at the epic battle with wide trepidation and admiration in their eyes, so thoroughly impressed and terrified by the feats all the same. But Naruto didn't. Naruto could not see these things. Naruto couldn't hear. Naruto couldn't speak. No, something in him, seeing Zabuza fight with that sword, it sparked something in him, something that Walter was speeding up. Scarlet reishi began pouring out of him, a flame of blood, encircling his form, slowly gathering all around him. And, unbidden, he raised his sword, causing the aura of crimson to radiate and pulsate. Both Kakashi and Zabuza stopped mid-attack, eyes wide, pressure and fear coming over them both. Zabuza turned. Oh she! And a miasma of crimson came down on him, all coming from the single swain. Rangaku Matsumoto awoke with widened eyes, startled with fright, as her slender hands frantically feeling around, as if she were missing something, or someone, from her bed. Her heart raced as all she felt were her sheets and her bed. She began to shake, teeth gnashing and grinding together, threatening to chip if she didn't stop, if she didn't find what was missing. Then, the feeling passed, and her fright was quelled. Yet still, she sat, eyes glazed over with an empty glare. What was that? Matsumoto, are you well? Her eyes shifted lazily up to her captain. His white spiky hair and cool gaze the first thing she saw. Next, her gaze fell and saw that he was garbed in his captain robes, as if all ready for a mission. Strange, they just finished one last week, why were they having another one? Her lazy mind did not like the thought of yet another one. Toshiro, what time is it? Her voice returned to her a moment later, a slight grumble to her tone. He merely raised an eyebrow. It's nearly noon, why haven't you gotten up yet? Was his slightly irate reply. Oh, 5 more minutes. She yawned out, laying herself back down. Gritting his teeth in annoyance, and a tick mark appearing over his forehead, the short captain barked at her. This is not a time to sleep, you have a mission to do. She opened a single lid to him, lazily saying, why can't you do it? That triggered the captain. There is a captain meeting issued. He bellowed with hot anger flying with his words. I can't go to the shinobi world to investigate the leakage of reishi. Someone has tried to get through the gates of the Celebratory and the head captain fears they will try again. It was only by Ichimaru that they stopped and fled. He screamed out, his fury pouring like a gushing waterfall, coming down on the lieutenant without mercy. She flinched and sat up straighter in the beginning of his rant, but soon her eyes widened to dinner plates when he mentioned that she'd be going to the shinobi world. Rangaku flung herself out of bed faster than you could say Bankai, going straight towards her closet and stripping, flinging her clothes back and right in Hitsuga's face blocking his view and proceeded to get her Shinigami clothes on. When the captain finally peeled the cloth from his face, ready to tear into his lieutenant for not listening, she had already booked it towards the Senkaimon. Even after that, he still stood there, brows knit by confusion. Eventually, the short captain gave out a long, dragged-out breath. What is wrong with that woman? Toshiro heard himself say. In the shinobi world, a battle was taking place, one that Zabuza Momoichi was having a hard time fighting. How could it be, this boy, have this strange jutsu? It was very troublesome dodging the great red energy thing that came down on him, especially after fighting Kakashi, the exhaustion from before leaving him winded. The man himself was not the boy's target being his sensei and all and took to resting by the sidelines. The thing itself that the boy was flinging at him was something unlike chakra, yet still a part of it, somehow. Whatever it was, he sure as hell wasn't gonna let it hit him. He'd seen what it did to the poor trees behind him, but at the same time, he was getting very tired of dodging them, so. Stop doing that, He shouted, leaping over another wave of crimson energy. He was getting annoyed, having a constant barrage of those things really put a strain on him. Why don't you stop being a wimp and actually fight me? Sword to sword, he bellowed, hoping the boy would take the bait. The miasma of scarlet stopped. Zabuza gazed across the large pond, seeing Naruto there, his sword held aloft, both of his hands gripping with white-knuckled strength in his hands. He pointed that sword towards Zabuza for a brief moment, eyes hardening. Then, suddenly, he disappeared. The devil of the mist felt his senses scream. Left. He turned, bringing his word around, flinging it at his side to block Naruto's from taking his head off. With a mighty push, he got some distance, Zabuza baring and gritting his teeth as he did so, and he sprinted across to bear his sword back around, meeting the slightly smaller one with sparks flying. Again and again, they came together, slashing and hacking at one another, trying to gain dominance over one another. They flung themselves into the fight, large sweeping arcs forcing the water beneath them to shudder and separate with each passing blade. Zabuza leapt above the boy, and when he landed, swung back around, hitting nothing but air. Naruto was above him, bringing his sword down in sorta tucked in front flip, but Zabuza saw it coming, yet just barely did he leap back, gaining a gap of breathing space between them. Zabuza stopped atop the water, huffing and puffing, his chakra running low. His weary gaze lifted to the boys, unquestioning to the fact that the young lad stood instead atop the air for right now. He was seeing something in those sapphire eyes he didn't know such a young lad could have. I see it now. His voice was rough, driven to harsh breath from exhaustion. I see it, that flame burning in your eyes. Why you? It's not that you want to kill me. A bout of coughing overtook him, uncontrollable as he tried to remain standing. And no, that's not at the forefront of those eyes. You want to fight, you want to be the winner. More strenuous coughing nearly floored him then. It went on for a few more huffs, then he gained control of his breathing once more. You're tired of losing to the world, haha. I guess I can understand that. He finally got out, eyes half-lidded, a smile beneath his cloth-wrapped face. Then, he fell, barely sinking in the shallow end, a collapse of limbs and it was done. But that fire still burned in Naruto's gaze, as Walter urged him to end it completely, to make sure the man was down. Naruto had no idea what was happening, being in the daze he was in. As he lifted his arm up, gathering reishi around him and his Asachi, ready to release it on the fallen man. He swung down, that crimson energy lashing out in one large, sweeping arc of scarlet, racing to cleave the devil of the mist in twine. It rushed over the land and over the pond, uncaring for any and everything, crashing through waves and water unabated. Then, it reached Zabuza's fallen frame. Hineka. A gust of gray particles came rushing in to block the blood-red reishi, just in time too, any later, and it would have been too late to save him. The gray particles ground against the energy, both trying to gain the upper hand. But soon, in a flash of light, the reishi exploded harmlessly against the gray wall. When the energy dispersed fully, that gray cloud came swarming back towards its owner, forming back into a sword with a cat head for the guard. Rangaku Flash stepped before Naruto, Zanpakuto sheathed, clasping him by the shoulders with great worry. Naruto, what's wrong? She screamed, concerned for her weak old student, seeing the glazed-over look he had on. She was distraught, having come here, to see her student, see if he were okay after hearing about the leakage of reishi, yet finding him in the middle of a fight. Matsumoto had suspected as much, but hadn't realized the depth of the situation. She had no idea what the man had done, but with the look in Naruto's eyes, she was sure something was amiss. He continued to stare on, absent-minded. With regret burning in her gaze, Rangaku brought her hand back. Smack! She struck him across the face, hoping that it'd snap him out of it. His gaze turned towards her, eyes half-lidded. Naruto, are you okay? Her voice was pleading. His eyes fell completely shut, steel garters having fallen over his eyes, not to be opened with any ease, and he fell forward, right in between Rangaku's valley. She gasped, brows raised, but she caught him nonetheless, holding his head there as his Zanpakuto fell from his grip, sticking into the muck of the pond. She turned him over, cradling him with worry. What happened here? She asked herself. She merely had just come from the gate not too far from here, just expecting him to be training, or at least lightly fighting, but as it turns out, something else happened entirely. Rangaku found herself crouching in the air, still holding him with care. That's what I'd like to know. Came the voice of Kakashi as his shadow came over hers. She bolted up, turned, and readied herself to unsheath Hinata and cut down whoever was behind her. Rangaku found that the person standing behind her was not unlike a scarecrow-made man, skinny yet tall, hovering over her and Naruto, as if to pluck him away from her slender grip. "Who are you?" Her voice was hard. He looked down on her with a lazy eye, as if reading her face, but in the end of the long silence between them, he just held up a hand, so as to say that they had no qualms. In the buxom Ed Broad's opinion, it was half-assed. "My name is Kakashi, he is my student. Now my question, who are you exactly?" He nearly demanded of her, yet still he kept his cool tone. "I am the one who gave him his sword, his Zanpakuto, and it appears he is close to achieving Shikai. So if you would kindly leave me be before I cut you down, whoa there." She was halfway through her rant when the Scarecrow Man fell forward. This time, she twirled away, making him fall face first into the water instead of where Naruto had. But that was none of his business. "What is going on?" Rangaku asked herself when suddenly two other kids that looked to be about Naruto's age came rushing into the water. She heeded them no mind and gave them space as they gathered their sensei. Sasuke grabbed one arm and Sakura the other, pulling his head from the depths. The man still did draw breath. Rangaku asked, "Who are you two?" With a long breath, Sasuke told her to bring Naruto along, that they were going to someone's house to get those two patched up. She looked into the boy's onyx eyes, glaring deeply, seeking out any lies that could be held there. Rangaku so desperately wanted to take Naruto to Soul Society, wanted him to come with her, even though she only knew him for a little over a week. There was something in him she found familiar. Perhaps it was his determination, or maybe it was his cute face she adored. But she also knew that she'd be in great trouble if she took him back, if the head captain found out what she did. So, in the end, within the Uchiha's eyes, all she could see was someone trying to help a comrade. With an all-around nod, they came walking towards the shore, her carrying Naruto's sword, where they had left Tazuna. "Who are you?" he asked, trying in vain to keep his gaze with hers, what with him being a slight drunk. "My name is Rangaku Matsumoto," she told, then asking, "Who are you guys?" "I'm Sakura," the pinkette told. "Sasuke," told the cool-headed boy. "Bridge builder Tazuna," they all answered. They got to walking after that, Naruto carried by Rangaku, Kakashi carried by the Tugenin, and the Asachi carried by Tazuna with great strain. Silence lay between them for a while, none finding anything to say to one another. Rangaku didn't much mind the gap of words, it left her time to think. For starters, what was it that had gotten Naruto so worked up that he was beginning to get close to Shikai? Was the fight he was having with the man from earlier the cause of this? Or, maybe, his Zanpakuto spirit wished to speed the process along. Perhaps it was seeing another blade that spurred the spirit onto battle. "Hey, Rangaku-san," said woman jumped a slide, the pinkette's words piercing her deep thoughts. The endowed woman turned towards the younger lass and asked what of it she wanted. "Well," she began, a backwards glance at the woman, "how is it that you know Naruto?" she asked, plain curious. The Matsumoto perched her lips together in thought. Then, as her mind seemed to click, she said thus. "I am the one who gave him his sword," Rangaku told, seeing as they were too far to hear what she said to their teacher, getting wide eyes and slight hangs of the mouth from the two young shinobi. "This giant thing," Tazuna wailed from her side, interrupting their shock, barely holding up the large instrument of death. "I can hardly carry this damn thing, let alone swing it," he bellowed next. The orange-haired woman smiled gently, trying to make sure the man would continue to hold the blade as they went towards the Mont's house. He gave a fuming glare, but otherwise kept his mouth shut, resigning to his fate as they came closer to his house. While they walked away from the fallen Zabuza and as someone in a white mask gathered his body up, Naruto found himself in his mindscape once more. He stood there, before Walter, a slight glare to his gaze. In the barren lands, Walter stood a distance from Naruto as well, his own, stoic, stare coming back at the young lad. Both remained this way for some time. "Why are you staring at me? That look is one of anger, and I've done nothing wrong, I merely gave you my strength." Walter's rough voice came out, breaking that encompassing silence. "That wasn't what I wanted." Naruto seethed, clenching his teeth. He hated what happened, to be overcome by a force he had no control over, incapable of moving one's own muscle with his will, yet someone else urging them without him bidding them to. His mind itself was clouded by sweet smoke, telling him to do as it told. But Walter begged to differ. He thought what he did was just fine. He thought he was doing by the boy rightly. He thought what he wanted, his desire to do that he wanted, was what was right. Walter made that known. What I did was for you, boy. His voice was harder, as he took a step towards Naruto. What I did was solidify the things that we share. Another step, tone rising with fury backing. What I did, Naruto. What I did for you was to make sure you won. His full rancor came down on the boy then. A great bellow of rage set on the lad, unmerciful with its weight. Naruto did not flinch away from the tall man, his determined glare still staring and blaring into Walter's eyes. His lips curled back, hot anger fueling him now as well, prodding him on, as he bared his teeth to his Zanpakuto spirit. That doesn't matter. He exploded out with a gravelled chorus of fury. I want you to help, but that doesn't mean I want to be some kind of blind. Raging monster. Naruto flung his words with venom dripping between. With fist clenched and fury raging in him, he swung. Whack. For the first time, in what seemed like a very long time, Walter was surprised. It was a nice punch, he concluded. It stung him, it had some actual force behind it. The punch actually bit him, a small cut appearing over his cheek where the boy had knocked him one. Oh, but for his words, the things the boy spat in his face, for those things. I am triggered. Wham! Walter delivered his own white-knuckled punch, a devastating blow that threw Naruto an almost literal ragdoll with enough force that sent him rocketing across the plains of the desert. When enough of the blow began to fade, he struck his head against the hard ground first, which began to torque his body round. Tumbling end over end in a cartwheel of painful rolls, he finally, in teeth-clenching pain, came to a full stop, when his back crashed into a large boulder. Walter was already there, squatting next to the lad, the boy's body beaten up with eyes half-lidded. Now you listen here, I will continue to help you, despite what you just said, but have no doubt in your mind, and keep the words I speak now engraved into your thick skull, that the next time you try to fight me, make sure you can put me down, and keep me down. Because if you don't, here he trailed, leaning down to the boy's face, spitting out. I will kill you. He leaned back and away, standing up so that Naruto could only see his boots and legs. Then, Naruto heard him say, now wake up and get out of my world. Naruto's sapphire orbs slid lazily open, recognizing a warmth and softness, perhaps a comforter or plush blanket was wrapped round him. It were angels' wings tucking each light-filled feather firm yet comfortably against his tanned skin and tender flesh, caring greatly for each little digit or ligament, forsoring naught but his comfort. Was it though? He thought, through bleary eyes, each filled with the clouds of the beginnings of a wakefulness. Then the fog of his dazed eyes cleared. His first cognitive thought was that of a simple pondering. First, why was there a mound of supple flesh the immediate thing he saw when he awoke? The next, simple it was, is why his arms were wrapped in a firm grip around some slender frame. Then, the very last thought he had, was why in the world was a beautiful woman sharing a cot with him? Was this heaven? All this information seemed to lag for some time, not quite reaching the forefront of his mind until that moment. His reaction, despite what he normally would have done, was not to freak out. Instead, he recognized these voluptuous features in mere moments, realizing that it was not any other woman wrapping their slender arms around him. No, this was someone he knew, someone he found that he longed to see. I missed you, Rangaku-chan. He whispered more to himself than to her. Naruto didn't care if she heard what he said then, instead, he sunk deeper into her valley, eyes closing once more. Sleep did not come, not one bit. There was not one sinew in his body that ever felt any exhaustion right then, right there. He simply just did not give a shit. He cursed, eyes opening once more, brows furrowing to find points as he realized something. He had been fighting just a bit ago, and he remembered defeating the man Zabuza. He remembered that Walter had nearly killed through him the devil of the mist. The man, as he recollected, lay in the pond, only due to chakra exhaustion. So if he was to say, like any other nin, to have a teammate in the incident that he had fallen into a sticky situation, get him out of it. That meant that, oh, sugar honey iced tea. He's still walking. He closed his eyes tight, breathed in a deep breath, and let another long, drawn-out, curse. He opened his blue gaze once more, and noted that Rangaku was still sleeping soundly, despite his foul mouth. Making the sign behind her back, and channeling his chakra, Naruto made a clone standing right behind him. With another few subtle sign, he used Kimiwari, switching him and his clone without even disturbing the orange locks flowing down her angelic face. He leaned down and told the clone to keep it quiet, and to make sure she didn't wake up until he came back. "Can do, boss," the clone remarked with a slight grin, making sure his voice was low so that he would not awaken the lass. Nodding in approval to his clone, Naruto snuck himself into the next room, grabbing his Zanpakuto on the way. He found himself in a kitchen, finding Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi, who was quite bandaged up, all of who were sitting down and chatting with Tazuna. There was a young lady he did not know of there too, dark hair and a pleasant way about her she did have. She saw him first and greeted him kindly, a smile of gentleness warming her face. Her name was Tsunami, he soon learned, the bridge builder's daughter. The woman had him sit, and he did, as she gave him a small bowl of ramen. His eyes lit up to bright and shining sapphire orbs brilliant with thanks, as he dug into the small meal. My, such a hungry lad," Tsunami commented, a damn near grin on her face, happy that someone, a complete stranger no less, would so eagerly devour her food, even if it was not much food. "Ish good," he told, an adamant grin on his whiskered visage, happy to eat such good ramen. This pleased her well, it seemed. After he consumed his ramen, Kakashi asked, "So Naruto, how do you know Rangaku?" It was almost cheeky, his voice was, but his tone was pinched, as if he had no time for lies. Naruto sat back, giving the man a slight once-over, but knew that there was no point in lying. "Do you remember that scroll Mizuki had me steal?" He began, telling them of all that occurred from then till now, even going over Walter and why he had gone into such a haze. But, even explaining his story to his best capabilities, they still had questions. Sasuke for one asked how he had flouted on the air, or when Kakashi asked about how he was able to move at such speeds. "Well, I'm not sure of that one, but, you know that Reishi and Ryuko that I talked about?" Naruto asked, getting a nod from the last Uchiha. "See, I gather that beneath my feet, suspending me there, but I was being controlled, so I probably won't have enough control to do it now. Rangaku-san taught me what she could," was his response, a shit-eating grin on his face. But Sasuke seemed to understand. He turned to his sensei next, his grin disappearing. "It's a high-speed move that Rangaku taught me. It was the very thing that I used to get those bells from you. It is done by using as little as steps possibly when moving, and practice. The only reason I was able to beat you then was for that last reason." But, here his grin came back, "If you brought out that Sharingan you'd probably see it coming a mile away." Naruto was about to stand and stretch when Sakura asked him something. "But, how did you do that thing with your sword? That big slash and energy, how did you do that?" Her expression was that of plain curiosity. He on the other hand lost his grin once more. "I really don't know." Naruto looked anywhere but her, having not a clue how to answer her. Instead of pressing it, she asked him another question. "Why do you and that girl sleep together in the same bed?" His eyes flew right back to hers fast as if they were greased lightning, and saw the blush on her bright face. Naruto imagined he was too, counting the heat arising on his cheeks, and stuttered a slur of words, eyes blinking and darting like flies. I mean, the blonde found himself coughing in his own nervousness, turning to Kakashi for some distraction. "Hey Kakashi." His voice was high and strained, cracking. "So what are we gonna do now that Tazuna's back?" Naruto's tone leveled some, yet still it held a slight strain. Well, I have reason to believe Zabuza is still alive and is healing as we speak, so for right now, our mission of protecting Tazuna is yet to be over. I planned on having you and the others work on tree exorcises, gain some control over your chakra so that we may be ready when he does attack." Naruto nodded, coming to the same conclusion, when Rangaku came sprinting in the room, Shinigami clothes held loosely together while his clone was tucked under her arm. The clone was very flushed in the position his head was in. "Hey, no one is teaching him anything. That's my job." She thrust a thumb to her chest making it jiggle and proceeded to stomp towards Kakashi. He stood, a painful gimp in his leg slowing him, and glared right back at her with his single eye. "That is none of your business," he told, trying to keep his cool. "Oh yeah, Naruto, who's a better teacher?" Both turned to him, and he jerked back from the stares they gave him. But, after taking in the question, he answered, "You both are lazy." Rangaku turned back to Kakashi and gave him a nasty glare, then let go of the clone, who dispersed quickly and grabbed the real Naruto, who still had a grip on his sword. She began to drag him away, right out the door, yelling behind her, "I'll prove you'll be a better Shinigami than he ever would be a shinobi." With her passing declaration, Rangaku left, and all were able to do nothing about it. Outside, back into the deep of the woods, Rangaku set Naruto down, standing woodenly with a breath and sigh, a feeling of relief washing over her. Her gaze transfixed onto Naruto thereafter, a look of contemplation playing at the edges of those sky-blue eyes of hers. For a long time, her lips did not part to speak to him, instead it was silence that filled the air between his ears. "Are you okay?" she asked at last, eyes almost pleading. Naruto still stood there, in silence, a word unspoken, one that came not to his lips nor his tongue for a long while. When he did speak, his voice quaked, unsure of himself, but it was enough for her. "Yeah." Her face broke out into a smile, gentle and kind, almost like tsunamis. Rangaku's arms wrapped round his shorter frame, enveloping him in her embrace. He smiled too, hugging her back. When they eventually backed away, Naruto felt himself grinning. Rangaku noticed it and asked why. "You said you'd make me a better soul reaper than a shinobi." A grin infested her face then as well. "I said that?" He punched her in the arm, a hearty laugh coming from him. She laughed too, her chuckle sweet and endearing, a chime of whimsy joy, both shaking their heads. When their laughter died down, and they could take a moment of silence, Naruto asked her why his Zanpakuto was trying to get him to learn Shikai, why he was so adamant about what he wanted. Rangaku blinked a bit, once, twice, thrice, then gave a heavy sigh. "Since you're going to achieve Shikai soon, your Zanpakuto, he wants to speed it up, so that he can do what he wants." She gave a lengthy sigh, asking, "So, did he tell you what that was?" With a blink, Naruto said, "He said his wants are the same as mine, basically, so." "What do you want, Naruto?" Rangaku asked, throwing the boy off as she stepped closer to him, her sky-blue eyes piercing right into his sapphire ones. He tried to speak, but with her body so close to his, so quickly in the way she crowded him, the whiskered blonde found his tongue almost literally tied. It didn't help that her breasts were almost against his face either. "I don't want." "Louder, you have to be clear," she told, pressing into him even more, her eyes never wavering from that heated and concentrated glare. He almost lost it then, but he bit back that stutter and let out a whooping. "I am tired of losing." Silence veiled them both, the birds stopped their chirping and singing, the trees themselves bare no wind in their leaves. All was still, all was silent, none spoke, none moved. There was only that glare, the gleam that persisted in the color of her eyes, never faltering, always piercing deeper into his. Rangaku leaned back, giving a sigh not unlike disappointment. His heart was pounding up until that moment, feeling as though it would burst from its confines from her closeness. But, after she gave that sigh, that sounded so much like she was disappointment, it nearly stopped. He had no time to wonder on such thoughts though, for she drew her Zanpakuto, holding it at the ready, white-knuckled and bearing such a serious expression that it nearly frightened him. Naruto, her voice, sharing semblance with her stare, was heated. "Draw your blade, I will not go easy on you. If we leave your Zanpakuto spirit in such a feral state, you may end up destroying things you will not want to destroy." "But, Rangaku, draw it now," she exploded, lunging madly at him, Hinata closing in a large sweeping arc. Shane, he had just barely blocked such a devastating blow, forcing his guard up with her reverberating strength. She may have been a well-endowed woman, which you would think they would slow her down, she may sound like she was an airhead, and she may be lazy, but those things mattered not when it came down to a fight. No, this was not just a fight to her. This was no simple brawl you could just watch and enjoy from some hidden sideline. This was a battle. Naruto found that out very quickly as he continued to block each ferocious strike. Sparks showered them, the air whistled with each swing she made to strike him down. It was all he could do to block, and even dodge, that sword of hers. Rangaku spun, one-handing her blade as she swung out. He evaded it, she was wide open, and he took the small advantage. Naruto came back, coming down on her with as much power her could muster. The blow sang a sharp tune of bells throughout the forest, scattering birds with its tone. She blocked him, one hand against her blade to keep enough leverage, but she could not lift his sword away, leaving them in a deadlock. Naruto had the leverage, giving her a run for her money and strength. Reishi began to build around his feet, a slow swirl of scarlet rising above his head as his Zanpakuto pressed harder into her defense. Rangaku, he bellowed at her, clearly pissed. I don't want to fight you. Her face was scrunched up, anger brilling up into her face as she tried to concentrate on blocking his blade. But even through grit teeth, she retorted back. If you don't fight me, you will go berserk. The orange-haired lass barked, to which Naruto faltered in his build-up of strength. Big mistake. Rangaku pushed that giant sword to the side, and with the close proximity, tackled him. Zanpakutos went flying as they tumbled down a steep knoll of grass and hill, both grappling one another in an attempt to gain a hold against the other. Naruto's back slammed into the ground at last, with Rangaku on top of him, holding his arms down. Now, if he were a normal human, his ribs would have been broken if not shattered from such a fall. But, he was no ordinary human. With her atop him, Naruto could see that she no longer held her serious gaze, or at least, she was trying to, but failed, as a slight smirk played at the corners of her lips. Now what? Her voice was. Naruto smirked. Her knees were on his thighs, and so he spread his legs, making her lose her balance when her legs did the same. She fell forward, hands unclasping from his wrists, trying to gain stature again by forcing her hands into the ground. With his arms free, he hugged her back and lifted his leg up, kicking the ground with his heel and sending them into another tumble. Now Naruto was on top, holding her wrists down. He stared into her eyes with the biggest grin Rangaku had ever seen, and ever so slowly, inched his face close to hers, never losing that big smile of his. Right in front of her, his lips moved to speak in the very same tone she, just moments before albeit in the opposite position just had spoken. Now what? It took a moment for those words to sink in, but boy, when they did. Peef. Him. It started between the two like some sort of symbiotic disease, slowly rising from the back of their throats. Ha. Now it raised in volume, a low chortle between the two even as Naruto continued to hold her down. Ha. 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 Laughter burst from them both as they lost their hold to any semblance of seriousness, too enwrapped in their own silliness. Naruto along with his teacher could not stop the laughter, nor did they wish to. They were so jovial and happy then, so it would take them such a time to calm from it. Eventually, after their laughter devolved from its boisterous bouts to slower and slower chortles, they came to a stop. Now, there was nothing that could keep them from staring at one another. So close, faces but a hair's breadth away. Rangaku herself could not help but feel a heat work its way to flush across her cheeks, what with Naruto laying atop her the way he was, his hands holding hers down. So forceful. Naruto wasn't so thick in the head to realize the gaze that she had was not but of want, of a need. Naruto saw the glazed look veiling her sky-blue eyes, the soft lift of her brows, and the slight gape her mouth had however slight it was. He couldn't help himself either, and she saw it too. One moment, he was staring down on her with that same look she had, the next moment. He was kissing her, and unbidden she felt her own lips part, inviting him without restraint. Naruto felt her open her mouth, and he met with the same willingness, the heat on their faces felt between them both. He bit the bottom of her lip a nibble that forced a moan from her. Wanton lust covered their faces when they broke apart, his and her breath coming up in short, uneven breaths. I missed you, a lot. She sat up from beneath him, staring him straight in the eyes. I see that. Rangaku gave a short laugh, stopped, then bobbed her head a slow bit, then added, but, I guess I can't say that I didn't enjoy the kiss, it was. She trailed off, turning her head from his for a moment longer. Rangaku brought it back soon after, a smile plastered on her face. You're the first guy that was comfortable enough with me being so close to them. Usually they get scared off because of. Her voice trailed again, her eyes coming down to her chest. They're intimidated. He raised a brow to that. She nodded. And the ones that aren't, are creeps. Her voice was actually decidedly pleasant then. Naruto grinned, leaning close to her again. Then what am I? He asked. Cute, was her short reply. I am not cute. He yelled, offended that he was called such. He was thinking along the lines of valiant, brave, hell, he'd take handsome. But cute? She leaned into him, inches from his face. Her face nearly the same as it was since before the kiss, if more teasing than lustful. I like cute, she told. His eyes widened to silver saucers then. Naruto could be cute. Naruto liked cute. But, too late, she backed away, that playful smirk on her lips. Naruto pouted, she laughed, and he gave a slight chuckle. After they walked back up the steep hill, retrieving their Zanpakuto, Rangaku told Naruto that she had to leave and go back to Soul Society. He was saddened by this, but she assured him that sometime she would take him there, so that they could hang out for a little bit, talk and maybe go on a date sometime. His head never nodded so fast in his life, so easily agreeing to the woman he began to think more than just a teacher. Rangaku left by the time it was nightfall. After wishing her well, Naruto came back to Tezuna's house, a smile on his face. He looked and saw that Kakashi sat in one corner, trying not to move too much so that his body would heal, and a smiling Sakura at the table, eating something with Tsunami on the opposite side, smiling along. Tezuna was in a chair, drinking sake. Sasuke was laid out on the floor, obviously having exerted himself way too much. Yo, Naruto greeted. Tsunami smiled and waved, Tezuna nodded. Kakashi gave a peace sign, while Sakura just gave a, hey. Sasuke tried, in vain, to give a thumbs up in recognition. What happened to him? Naruto asked. Kakashi answered, he thought you were doing some intense training and pushed himself on the tree walking exercises a bit too much. Dat boy chakra drained. Naruto lifted a brow at the strange wording but said nothing else, placing his sword in the corner and sitting down next to Tsunami, thanking her for the meal. As he began to dig in, halfway through his meal, Sakura asked him what kind of training he did do, and why Rangaku had already left. Oh, she had to go back to the place she lives. It's kinda hard to describe what she said it was. It wasn't, but he thought there would be more questions if he told her and anyone in the room listening that she was from a place where the dead go. She took the answer and smiled, but then asked about the training once more. Yeah, what is it that you two did? Kakashi asked, still a little angry that the woman had tried to exert herself as a more capable teacher than he was. But, if his ire showed, Naruto said nothing of it. In fact, me and, he choked on his words, a bright blush creeping across his face. They were doubly intrigued by the stutter and flush on his cheeks, and pressed it further. As this went on, Tsunami moved to her father's side, asking him what was going on. With one arm on the top of the chair's frame, leaned back, and a single leg crossed, he looked on across the room, sipping his sake. Now I don't know what he and that lady were doing, but that ain't none of my business.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.